Nityananda Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna. Okay, so this morning we're going to be continuing our reading from the Chaitanya Charitamrita, pastimes leading up to the celebration of the Rath Yatra ceremony. So I'd like to just say a few introductory remarks. So Rath Yatra, which we'll be celebrating in less than 2 weeks, is spoken about briefly. There's some mention of it in the Nectar Devotion. I'll just read one short paragraph here. It says, in the Brahmanda Purana, it is said, a person who sees the Lord's Rath Yatra car festival and then stands up to receive the Lord can purge all kinds of sinful results from his body. A similar statement is there in the Bhavishya Purana, in which it is said, a person who follows the Rath Yatra car when the deities pass in front, from behind, even if born of a lowly family, will surely be elevated to the position of achieving equal opulence with Vishnu. And of course there's this mantra that Prabhupada himself chanted in at least one lecture that he gave. It goes, Rate cha vamanam drishtva punar janma navijate. Simply by seeing the Lord on the chariot, one makes advancement for stopping the repetition of birth and death. So Rath Yatra is an important item in devotional service. It was actually given to us by Prabhupada himself. It's an item, I guess it would fall under the category of archana. There's 9 processes of devotional service. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Bandhanam, Vapadasevanam. Anyway, it's Archanam. And it's, as I said, it's one of the 9 processes of devotional service. And these 9 processes of devotional service are there for the purpose of helping us reawaken our dormant love for Krishna. And somebody might say, well, you Hare Krishnas, what's your relevance? The world has got so many big problems. COVID, global warming, this, that, the other thing, and you're here in your temples and just trying to reawaken your dormant love for Krishna. What does that have to do with anything? Well, it's the most relevant thing. I'm going to read a couple sentences from Prabhupada's preface to the Krishna book, and you'll understand what I mean by that. So Prabhupada says here in this introduction to the Krishna book, he says, generally people think that by advancing the cause of moral principles and religious rights, they will be happy. Others may think that happiness can be achieved by economic development, and yet others think that simply by sense gratification they will be happy. But the real fact is that people can be happy only by loving Krishna. Okay? So what could be more relevant than happiness? That's the most relevant subject, issue, topic that human beings can possibly address their attention to. And Prabhupada's saying here that the real fact is that people can be happy only by loving Krishna. So it's totally relevant. And so participating in the Rath Yatra, as we'll be doing in less than 2 weeks, and even hearing about the Rath Yatra is very potent. It's very powerful. It's something that helps us develop our love for Krishna. A couple paragraphs forward here, Prabhupada says this about the Krishna book. He says, the result of hearing Krishna, this book Krishna, will be imperishable satisfaction of the soul, both individually and collectively. So the same thing. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami makes the statement right at the end of this chapter we're going to be talking about today, called the Beta Kirtan pastimes. He says, I bless everyone with this benediction. By listening to this description, one will surely become a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And many similar benedictions are there throughout the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So the idea is that just hearing these things, just hearing about these devotional activities is very auspicious and helps one reawaken one's dormant love for Krishna. There's that verse, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sabhu Kabinaya Shravanade Sude Chitte Kore Udaya, that pure love for Krishna is lying dormant within the heart of every living entity, and it's awakened by the process of hearing and chanting. So that's what we're doing today. So this chapter is called the Beta Kirtan Pastimes. Everybody knows what a kirtan is. Does anybody know what a Beta Kirtan is? I didn't either until about 9 o'clock last night when I realized, hey, wait a second, what is a Beta Kirtan? So I researched it on the database. Beta, it means it's a kirtan that's going around, covering. That was what I looked up all the references. So in other words, when the kirtan is not in one place, when you're not standing in one place, but when it's moving around, that's the Beta Kirtan. And that's what Lord Chaitanya and his devotees did, in this chapter here. We'll hear about that. So the story begins. We're in Jagannath Puri. It's about 2 weeks and 3 days before the Rath Yatra festival. It's 3 days before Snan Yatra. And Lord Chaitanya is there. He's in Jagannath Puri. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is there. And already devotees are coming. Just like devotees used to come for the Mayapur festival. Prabhupada would be there. And then some sannyasis would be there. And one by little, this yatra would come, the Australian devotees would come, the American devotees would come, like that. So that's what's happening. Devotees are coming from all over in preparation for the anticipation of the Rath Yatra. So on this particular day, on one particular morning, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya went to see Lord Chaitanya because he had a proposal. He'd been requested to try to do something by Maharaj Prataparudra. As we know, Maharaj Prataparudra was strongly desiring to have a darshan, an interview, a meeting with Lord Chaitanya. He had heard about Lord Chaitanya from Maharaj Prataparudra heard about Lord Chaitanya from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was basically Maharaj Prataparudra's spiritual master. I don't know officially, but he functioned as such. He was the one who preached to Maharaj Prataparudra about Lord Chaitanya after he had become a devotee himself. And he inspired, he awakened in Maharaj Prataparudra this devotion for Lord Chaitanya and an intense desire to get his association. So he was requesting Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, please see if you can arrange a meeting like that. I'd like to meet him. So on this particular morning, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya went to where Lord Chaitanya was, and he said, I'd like to present a statement and for your consideration, without fear, because he was anxious. And so Lord Chaitanya said, sure, go ahead. But if it's acceptable, if it's good, I'll accept it. If it's not, I'll reject it. Like that. So, but you can, feel free. Go ahead, make your presentation, make your proposal. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, well, there's a king. His name is Maharaj Prataparudra, and he'd like to meet with you. And Lord Chaitanya went. As soon as he heard the word king, Lord Chaitanya put his hands over his ears and said, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, what are you saying? I'm a sannyasi. For a sannyasi, one in the renounced order of life, to meet a woman or somebody who's, or a man who's engaged in sense gratification, that's worse than drinking poison, And he quoted this famous verse, where I'm not sure exactly where it's from, but Niskinchanasya Bhagavad Bhajanon Mukasya Param Jigamashur Bhava Sagarasya Sandarshanam Vishayinam Ata Yositam Cha Ha Hanta Visha Bhakshanato Piyasadu. The Lord then informed Sobha, alas, for a person who is seriously desiring to cross the material ocean and engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord without material motives, Seeing a materialist engaged in sense gratification or seeing a woman who is similarly interested is more abominable than drinking poison willingly. So he was very strict, Lord Chaitanya. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when he heard that, he immediately agreed. He said, yeah, no, of course, that's right. But there is an exception here. That this king he's a devotee. He's not, I know he's a king, but he's a great devotee. And Lord Chaitanya said, no, it's okay. But even, just because he has the word king, that spoiled the whole thing. And he gave the example of if you have like a pot of nectar, but there's one drop of liquor in it, it spoils the whole thing. So just, or another example of you have a white sheet, and if there's one drop of black ink on it, spoils the whole presentation like that. So that was Lord Chaitanya's position. He just adamant, no, out of the question. I'm a sannyasi. Sannyasis don't do that. Period. And then he went on to tell Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, actually, please don't ever bring that up again. Don't even bring up the subject again. And if you do, I'm going to leave Jagannath Puri. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, when he heard that, he was like, oh, he realized, okay. He backed right off, of course, and he excused himself, and he went back to his house, and he was just meditating upon what had happened. Okay? So, simultaneously to this was, as I said, 3 days before Snan Yatra, Maharaj Prataparudra had just now returned from Cuttack, which was his capital, to Jagannath Puri. And along with him, he had his secretaries, his ministers, his military officers. Ramananda Roy was actually part of that entourage. He was part of that group. So when they reached Jagannath Puri, Maharaj Prataparudra and all his other people, they went immediately to the Jagannath temple to have darshan, pay respects to the deity like that. But Ramananda Roy went immediately to where Lord Chaitanya was, and paid obeisances. And as he was getting up, Lord Chaitanya embraced him. They embraced each other, and they were crying in ecstatic love like that because, they had met each other previously. Everybody knows, I think that sort of chapter 8 was these conversations between Ramananda Roy and Lord Chaitanya. So they had a relationship, and a very amazing relationship. So anyway, so there was devotees there with Lord Chaitanya at that time. Who was there? Paramananda Puri, Brahmananda Bharati, Lord Nityananda, Mukunda Dat, like that. A few devotees were there, and they were amazed to see, because they didn't know Ramananda Roy. They were amazed, who is this devotee who Lord Chaitanya has so much affection for, and who has so much affection for Lord Chaitanya? So they were really astounded. But anyway, we'll get to that. So immediately, Ramananda Roy, he started explaining to Lord Chaitanya. He basically says something to the effect, hey, I've got good news for you, that how you wanted me to retire from government service and just spend the rest of our lives together here in Jagannath Puri, remembering Krishna. So I proposed that to the king, King Maharaj Prataparudra, that I wanted to retire, and he was totally, in acceptance. He was he was ecstatic to hear. He was sitting on his throne, and when I mentioned your name and what I wanted to do, he got up from his throne and he embraced me, and he was, really ecstatic about the whole thing. And he promised me that I could retire on a full pension, guaranteed no reduction, and he gave me full blessings to do it. He was completely happy about the whole thing. And then he made the statement that he had heard from Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that you are none other than the son of Nanda Maharaj, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and that one's life is successful when one has the opportunity to serve, Lord Chaitanya like that. And I said something else, I can't remember, but Ramananda Roy commented to Lord Chaitanya that I don't think is even a fraction of the love that he has for you and me, like that. He really has a lot of devotion for you. So and then he was expressing, Maharaj Prataparudra, when he was with Ramananda Roy, he made that statement that, I really I hope I get the opportunity to render some service or get, have some association with Lord Chaitanya. So after hearing these statements by Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya said, you are a great devotee of Krishna. You're one of the greatest devotees of Krishna. And because he loves you, because he's shown love to you by assisting you, by, helping you in your service, then surely he's going to get the mercy of Lord Krishna. So he was softening. The point is, Prabhupada makes that point in his purport that because of, hearing about his attitude, Lord Chaitanya, okay, he was softening up. And so then that was that. Now the next, okay. Okay, then, yeah, so that happened. Now simultaneously, okay, along with that scene, there's another scene taking place, which is that Maharaj Pruti, as I said, he just got back from Katak. He's arrived back in Jagannath Puri, and they had that. Him and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had that. How would you say it? Project they were working on, trying to get him a darshan. So Maharaj Prataparudra calls for Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. He calls him, So Sarvabhauma comes to where he is, and Maharaj Prataparudra asks him, okay, so what's the news? How did it go? Did you ask? Were you able to arrange a meeting with me with Lord Chaitanya? And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had to tell him, actually, I tried my best, but I couldn't do it. As soon as I mentioned king, Lord Chaitanya said, forget it. There's no way he was going to see a king. So Maharaj Prataparudra, he was disappointed, and he made some statements out. Wow, Lord Chaitanya, he's the Patita Pavana. He's delivered all the world. He delivered Jagai and Madai. He's delivering people who generally are not fit to be even seen, but he's delivering everybody with the exception of one king, Maharaj Prataparudra. And he made a statement, something to the effect that, if he's so determined not to see me, then I'm feeling, maybe I should just be, he's feeling discouraged. Maybe I should just be determined to just give up my life. Like that. That's how disappointed he was. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, as I mentioned, is kind of like his spiritual master, and he could see that how, affected Maharaj Prataparudra was. So he tried to do things to console him, and he told him, no, look, you have great love for Krishna. I could see this, and just be patient, be determined. You're definitely going to get Krishna's mercy. Don't worry. He just had to try to encourage him. Don't think about giving up your life. That's out of the question, And actually, he offered him a practical plan. Maharaj Prataparudra felt encouraged by his words, and he offered him a practical plan. And the practical plan was, 2 weeks from now, when they have the Rath Yatra, Lord Chaitanya is going to be ecstatically dancing throughout the entire Rath Yatra. And at the end of the whole thing, he's going to be very tired from dancing, and he's going to go into this garden, Gundicha garden, and he's going to, he's not going to be in external consciousness. He's going to be very much still absorbed in the ecstasy of the Rath Yatra. And then at that time, you should go into the garden, but don't go in, you're dressed as a king. Just go in like some ordinary clothes, and you can massage him and recite the 5 chapters of the Rasa Lila, and that'll be very much appreciated. So when Maharaj Prataparudra heard that, okay, we got a practical plan now, he became encouraged. He felt much better, and he was feeling spiritually enlivened by that. So then that meeting ended. Okay. Now the next thing that happens is Snan Yatra. So Lord Chaitanya was very happy at the Snan Yatra, seeing Lord Jagannath, being bathed. The whole bathing ceremony was in ecstasy. But as soon as it was finished, and Lord Jagannath and Baladev Subhadra were removed from the altar, then he became kind of down. He really was feeling a lot of separation, a lot of anxiety. It was described, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami is described similar to the gopis when Krishna left Vrindavan. That's how he was feeling. And So he really just wanted to be by himself, So he went to Alalanath, which is about 2 miles away. And just because, how he was feeling, he just didn't want to see anybody, really. But the devotees followed him there. See, the problem was that the timing was really bad. They respected how Lord Chaitanya was feeling, but at the same time, the devotees were coming from all different places, and particularly a whole big group of devotees were coming from Bengal. So they followed Lord Chaitanya to Alalanath, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya seemed to be the key person in this. He explained to Lord Chaitanya what was happening, and they got him to come back. So he came back because, he didn't want to disappoint the devotees like that. So once Lord Chaitanya came back, then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya went to Maharaj Pratapuruja to inform him, okay, he's back. We got him back. He's back in Jagannath Puri now. And they were happy. And so at that same time, right at that same time when Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was there talking with Maharaj Pratapuruja, Gopinath Acharya appears on the scene. He comes in. Gopinath Acharya is the brother-in-law of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And there's a little interesting history here because he's one of the confidential associates, of Lord Chaitanya, Gopinath Acharya. He's like a, pure devotee of Lord Chaitanya going way back. And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya used to give him a bit of a hard time, because he would always be trying to get Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya to appreciate devotional service and in general, and Lord Chaitanya in particular. But Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was a Jnani. And he wasn't just any old Jnani. He was like the Shabda Pandit. He was like the dean. He was like the top. Imagine being the president of Harvard University for like lifetime. That was him. He was like a very highly placed. He taught the sannyasis how to be Mayavadis. He wasn't just a Mayavadi. He taught others. So he was like, very fixed in that understanding. So, and he used to kind of say things back to Gopinath Acharya. But of course, when Lord Chaitanya came to Jagannath Puri and they had that whole experience, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya became converted, then the dynamics of their relationship changed, and all of a sudden he developed new appreciation and respect for Gopinath Acharya. So anyway, Gopinath Acharya comes and he informs Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya that was it 8:15? I'm trying to there's 200 devotees coming now from Bengal. This is Gopinath talking to Sarvabhauma, and so I need accommodation for them, and I need an arrangement for prasadam. So Lord Chaitanya, Maharaj Pratapuruja overhears this, and because the three of them are there, and he says, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of that. That's cool." I mean, sorry, pardon my language, but he said, "I'll take care of that." And he saw that as a great opportunity for service, and he was very happy. And so then he went on to say, "Boy, I'd really like to know. I'd like to see these devotees, and I'd like to know who they are." And he said that to Sarvabhauma, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said to him, "Actually, to be honest with you, I don't know him. I've never met him. But Gopinath Acharya, he knows all of them. So let's go up on the roof," because he was there in his palace there. "Let's go up on the roof of the palace, and Gopinath Acharya will be able to point out to you who they are and, what their service is and like that." So they go up to the roof. And then, so meantime, the devotees are drawing nearer. They're coming down the road, approaching the palace and the temple. Same one road coming into the whole complex there. And so Maharaj Pratapuruja asks, who are those two? Who are those two people? They were devotees coming from Jagannath Puri going out. And so Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he happened to know who they were. He said, "That's Swarup Damodar, Lord Chaitanya's secretary, and that's Govinda, his personal servant." And then Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami takes us down from the roof. He takes us down to the ground, because it's like a few different things going on here at the same time. And he explains that so at that point, Swarup Damodar goes forward and he puts a garland on Advaita Acharya. And then Govinda, he puts a second garland on Advaitacharya and pays his obeisances. And then Advaitacharya, he asks Swarup Damodar, who is this? Because he didn't know who, he had never met him. Who is that? And then Swarup Damodar explains to him that, oh, this is Govinda. He was a servant, he was a disciple of Ishvara Puri, and he was a servant, and he was ordered by Ishvara Puri to come and be the servant of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's very qualified. And Advaitacharya said, oh, okay. And now it goes back up to the roof. And up on the roof, Maharaj Prataparudra, he's asking, well, who is that person who they just garlanded? And so then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya looks at Gopinath Acharya. Gopinath Acharya, that's Advaitacharya. He's one of the top devotees of Lord Chaitanya, and et cetera, said different things glorifying him. And then Gopinath Acharya proceeded to point out the different devotees who are coming, and said a little something about them. And then, so Maharaj Prataparudra was really inspired and impressed, enlivened by just seeing these devotees. And at one point he made the statement, after Gopinath finished pointing out who was who and like that, he said, wow, these devotees are so effulgent. I've never seen people like this. And the kirtan, because they weren't just trudging in, it wasn't just like, no. They must have had all their bags and stuff on some cart. They were chanting and dancing. They were entering Jagannath Puri, chanting and dancing. They're having a blissful, ecstatic kirtan. So Maharaj Prataparudra is seeing this, and he's hearing the kirtan, and he's remarking, wow, they're so effulgent, and the kirtan is so melodious, and the dancing is so, beautiful, graceful. And he was really impressed. He was really like, wow, amazing, And, but he asks, he said, well, I noticed, wait a second, they're going towards the Gambhira. They're going towards Kasinath Mishra's house, because there was one road, So he noticed that they were going in the direction of the house where Lord Chaitanya was staying, as opposed to going into the temple. So he asked, well, wait a second, but why are they going towards the house, And he said, well, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, look, they're going to see Lord Chaitanya. And he said, oh, okay. And he was kind of like, basically, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had to explain to him, they're on the path of Ragamarg, spontaneous love. These are not devotees who are like, on the path of the regulative principles. And anyway, so Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Maharaj Prataparudra asked a further question. Well, okay, but I noticed that these devotees were coming forward, hang on. All these names, sorry. Swarup Damodar and Govinda were distributing prasadam to the devotees. So, Maharaj Prataparudra was going, whoa, in a nice way. He was submissive. He wasn't challenging. But his mood was like, well, how come they're taking prasadam? And, how come they're not observing the regulative principles for pilgrims entering a holy place, such as shave your head, fast for the day, etc. And so Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya explained to me, yeah, you're right. That is, that's in the Shastras. Those are the indirect instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when the Supreme Personality of Godhead is there personally telling you to take prasadam, then obviously that's what you do. That supersedes these Shastric injunctions. It's kind of like, who's going to accept the regulative principle of fasting when Lord Chaitanya is there directly telling you to, encouraging you to take some prasadam. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, okay, he accepted it. As I said, he was submissive, and he thought that was a good explanation. And he was already totally impressed by all the devotees. So yeah, he just accepted, these devotees are on a higher level, which they, of course, they were. So then they come down from the roof. And, and at that point, okay. Okay, yeah. They come down from the roof, and Maharaj Prataparudra calls for Kasi Mishra, whose house Lord Chaitanya was staying in, and the temple, the Mat commander, the temple inspector, whatever you want to call him. And he explains to them, okay, look, here's what's going on. I want you to, all these devotees are coming, make arrangements. for their, accommodate them and prasadam and just in general, anything that Lord Chaitanya wants, do it. And even if he doesn't give a direct instruction, just if you can understand that this is what he wants, just make it happen. We want to roll out the red carpet, basically. That's what he was telling him. Really make him feel completely at home. So, and then Maharaj Prabhu goes someplace. And then, so Gopinath Acharya and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they, as soon as that little meeting broke up, they go to see, they follow the devotees to go to see Lord Chaitanya. So the devotees are heading towards the house of Lord Chaitanya, the whole 200 of them, chanting and dancing. And Lord Chaitanya comes out. He comes out from his place. He actually, who's been to Jagannath Puri? A few devotees. Who's been to the Gambhira? Small. It's not a big house. It's very small. It's like smaller than an ordinary apartment, really. So Lord Chaitanya was there. So he came out and he met the devotees on the road. First he met Advaita Acharya, and they embraced and etc. and exchanged loving words like that. And then he met with Srivas Thakur, and one by one he was welcoming, greeting all the devotees and hugging, embracing them and like that. And then he had them all come back to the house. House was very small, as I said, so they were really crowded. Who was anybody here ever in the Lotus building when Prabhupada was with us and had darshan? So Archita Sura was. He didn't raise his hand. Probably Savas was too, but the experience. Prabhupada was there. That room wasn't that big. And when Prabhupada had a darshan, which was open for everybody, devotees would crowd in there, and I don't know how many, they were packed, and the devotees would push their face up against the doors and the windows just to be able to, if you could just see Prabhupada, you felt yourself really fortunate, It's just probably something like that, very crowded. So then Lord Chaitanya was, interacting with all the devotees further, and because time is going to not allow me, but I'll just mention one. He was asking about different devotees, and exchanging. Haridas Thakur, he didn't see Haridas Thakur. So the devotees said, Haridas Thakur, he's back there on the road, And they looked over, there was Haridas Thakur way off in the distance there, and they said, go get him. So they went to get Haridas Thakur, and he said, no, I can't. I'm too fallen, I'm too contaminated, I don't want to. I have no authority to go any closer to the temple than this, something. So he refused. So they went back and told that to Lord Chaitanya, and Lord Chaitanya said, okay. He was actually happy, because he knew that on Haridas Thakur, that was genuine. He had that genuine humility. So anyway, so skipping some other things, but then the Kasi Mishra and the superintendent, they showed up again, and they said, okay, we're ready to go. We've got made all the arrangements for accommodating the devotees and prasadam. Do you want us to serve out prasadam right now? And Lord Chaitanya said, no, I got a plan. And he told them, he sent Gopinath Acharya and Vaininath Roy with Kasinath Mishra and the Mat commander. And so Gopinath Acharya, he cleaned all the rooms. They had already picked out where they were going to stay, so he cleaned all the rooms. And then Vaininath Roy and a few other devotees, they got more Mahaprasadam from the temple. And, then they all... Meantime, Lord Chaitanya told the devotees, he made an announcement, everybody go now to where you're going to be staying. And once they got back and said everything was clean and organized and ready, he said, go get settled in, go take a bath in the sea, look at the chakra on top of the temple, and then come back here and have lunch. And as they were leaving, they gave them all garlands and sandalwood pulp, like that, on their forehead. So they did that. And Lord Chaitanya, before the Mat commander left, he said, I need, there's a room there in the garden. It's a very secluded little room. I need that room. I want that room because I want to be able to hear and chant about Krishna there without anybody bothering me. Actually, Lord Chaitanya told a little white lie there, because he actually wanted that room for Haridas Thakur, And then after they went away, he went to see Haridas Thakur, and he said, hey, come, I got a place for you. Don't worry. And he showed him his room in the garden there, and he told him, you just stay here, chant, and every day we're going to bring you prasadam everything's, you're okay. And Haridas Thakur was very happy, and so that was nice. And then, so they all the devotees returned after bathing and everything to have lunch, and then Lord Chaitanya was there. He'd already finished before them. So as they were arriving, he was seating them all, making nice seating arrangements for everybody. And then he started serving out prasadam, Lord Chaitanya himself. And it's described that his hand was so big that he couldn't help but serve like what was, meant for 2 or 3 people. So he was serving, and the devotees were accepting the prasadam, on the plate. But then they were like this, holding their hands over the plate. And Lord Chaitanya he looked at Swarup Damodar, what's going on? And he said, Swarup Damodar explained to him, Lord, they're not going to eat until you sit down, and you have to eat first. They're not going to eat before you. So Lord Chaitanya, oh, okay. So Gopinath Acharya explained to him, look, around the other side of the building here, I've made another arrangement for you to take prasadam with your associates, Lord Nityananda and Paramananda Puri and, Brahmananda Bari, like that, these confidential devotees, the gurus, the spiritual masters. So Lord Chaitanya accepted that. So then Swarup Damodar and Govinda, they served the general master devotees, and Gopinath Acharya served out these other devotees with Lord Chaitanya. So then they all went, after lunch, they, went to take rest. And the plan was they'd meet in the evening. And so they all came back in the evening, all the devotees. And Lord Chaitanya said, okay, now we're going to the temple. So they went to the temple, and they watched the Upala Bhoga ceremony. And after that, the mock commander came, and once again he gave them all garlands and sandalwood pulp. And then Lord Chaitanya started a kirtan. And there was, he divided them up into 4 parties, 4 different groups. And it's described that there was 8 mridangars and 32 kartals. Now I don't know if that means total, or if that was in each group. Total. Aren't you just thinking total? And I'm getting a few people saying each group. Anyway, there was 200 devotees, so it could have been each group. It could have been whatever it was. Anyway, so there's 4 groups, and they started chanting, and Lord Chaitanya was dancing, and this is the Beta Kirtan. This is where the Beta comes in. He was going around the temple and around and around. Now, what we call the temple, technically is the kirtan. Kirtan mandap, right? So the temple itself is the altar. See, so there was the courtyard, in other words, and parts of the buildings were enclosed. That's the temple, right? But the courtyard was open. So the kirtan started, and the people from in Jagannath, they could hear the kirtan. It was a very resounding kirtan. 200 devotees, kartals, mridangas, amazing, powerful chanters. So the kirtan, and the people from outside, the local inhabitants, they could everybody started coming. Whoa, what's happening? Something really special is happening here. So they all started coming to the temple, and they were, trying to watch and hear the kirtan, maybe participate. And Lord Chaitanya is going around and around with the group there. Also, Maharaj Prataparudra he heard it, and he went up onto the roof of the palace, and he was looking down into the courtyard, because he could see. As I said, it wasn't all enclosed. The courtyard was open, so he could see. Also, Lord Chaitanya was dancing, and then at one point, Lord Chaitanya stopped in the back of the temple, and he just held the kirtan there, and he was dancing, and it's described he was jumping very high, and dancing and jumping very high, and he did that for a long time. And then finally, he stopped. He just stopped. And he, kind of took a break there. And then he said, okay, now. And he appointed 4 other people to dance. And he appointed Lord Nityananda, Advaita Acharya, Srivas Thakur, and Rakeshvara Pandit to be the 4 dancers in the 4 different groups. And then they started dancing. And I can't remember if they kept going around again or they just stayed in one place. But in any event, it was like an amazing kirtan, very uproarious, ecstatic. Devotees manifesting all sorts of different ecstatic symptoms, particularly Lord Chaitanya and these dancers and like that. And and this served to increase Maharaj Prataparudra's desire, his anxiety and his desire to get the association of Lord Chaitanya. So, we started off the class by saying that about Prabhupada said here that only the real fact is that people can be happy only by loving Krishna. Okay? So these pastimes are enacted, they're performed by Lord Chaitanya and his associates, who are none other than Lord Krishna, Lord Balaram, and their associates. It's like, a repeat for that purpose of encouraging people, trying to help people, inspire the conditioned souls to awaken their love for Krishna. And that's the effect it had on Maharaj Prataparudra. He hadn't got the association of Lord Chaitanya yet, but just by seeing the devotees, by hearing about them, by observing, hearing the kirtan, his anxiety, his intense desire to achieve the association of Lord Chaitanya was increasing incredibly like that. So once again, the chapter ends by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami saying, as I read in the beginning, by listening to this description, one will surely become a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. No, it's just hearing about these pastimes is very powerful and very potent, and awakens or arouses one's love for Lord Chaitanya or Krishna. So I'll stop there. Anybody have anything they'd like to say? Let you know.
In that famous verse that was quoted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, did you just quote, right? Niskinchanasya Bhagavan Bhajanon Mukasya. In that verse, it is explained that alas, for that person who wants to cross the ocean of material existence and be spiritual, but at the same time he sees a materialist, and similarly a woman, is worse than drinking poison. So we definitely know that verse is so powerful, a big teaching for the future, especially those who are in the renounced life, like sannyasis. So we know also that Srila Prabhupada came here and he preached, and devotees were like eager to make him meet these great personalities.
Yep.
And even he initiated many disciples, women and everything. How you reconcile that? That actually we as a preaching movement nowadays, our sannyasis, we're happy to hear that they're meeting someone in the higher rank in the government, like that. So how can you reconcile that at the preaching mood that we have now?
There's one.
Even when Srila Prabhupada went to meet, he was eager to meet great personalities.
Yeah, when you're reading the Chaitanya Chart and hearing things like that's like grad school, okay? But there's a big difference between grad school and kindergarten. And when Prabhupada came, that was kindergarten. There's a purport in the 7th chapter of the Adi Lila where he says how the Acharya can't be stereotyped. He says you can't change the habits of a community overnight like that. You can't. Prabhupada could understand. He was dealing with people that were in a certain mode of material nature, were in a certain existential position, and he had to. So he did. He did what he could see, what he could understand was required to enable us, the Westerners, to take to devotional service, which was allow the intermingling of boys and girls, men and women, because it would have been too artificial and too difficult for the devotees at that time, if he just would have said, try to introduce that standard that we just heard Lord Chaitanya enunciating earlier in this chapter here. So that's my understanding. Not that it's meant to necessarily stay like that. He didn't expect everybody to just stay at the kindergarten level necessarily, but that's the principle is to get people to engage in devotional service and become attached to Krishna, and etc. Advance in devotional service. So you don't start, just like in the material world, you don't start at the PhD level. You start at the lower level. And that's what Prabhupada was, it's my understanding. Okay, so thank you very much. Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.